Isabella parked her silver sedan in the usual spot outside the beauty parlor. It was early 6:30 in the morning, and the streets of Sao Paulo were just beginning to fill with people and cars. She liked to arrive early so she could get the salon ready for opening, review client records, and drink a cup of freshly brewed coffee in silence. Taking her keys out of her small leather purse, she opened the salon door. Inside smelled of hairsprays and expensive cosmetics. Isabella turned on the lights and the air conditioner. The day promised to be hot. She walked through the spacious hall to the small kitchen where the first thing she did was turn on the coffee machine. While the coffee brewed, she pulled out her day planner and began going through the entries for the day. 7:30. Isabella frowned, looking at her watch. Paula, one of the best handymen, usually came in at this time, but she wasn't in today. Isabella dialed Paula's number. The phone was unavailable. This was strange because in 3 years of working, Paula had never been late without warning. Maybe transportation problems, Isabella thought as she took a sip of hot coffee. At 8, the rest of the staff began to pull up. Isabella greeted them with a strained smile, trying to hide her anxiety. Paula's phone was still unanswered. "Good morning, Senora Maria." She greeted the first client of the day, an elderly lady who came in for a styling appointment every Thursday. "Have a seat. Anita will be with you in a moment." The day was gaining momentum. Isabella glanced periodically at the door, hoping to see Paula, but she was gone. By noon, the salon was in its usual bustle, hair dryers buzzing, scissors clinking, customers and masters talking animatedly. At about 1 o'clock, the salon door opened and Paula appeared on the doorstep. Her eyes were red and puffy from crying, her makeup was smeared, and her usually impeccably styled hair was in disarray. Isabella instantly realized something was wrong. She quickly walked over to Paula and, taking her by the hand, led her into the back room, away from the prying eyes of the customers. "What happened?" Isabella asked, sitting Paula down on a small couch. Paula burst into tears, covering her face with her hands. Isabella silently handed her paper napkins and sat down next to her, placing a hand on her shoulder. "Rogerio, he—" Paula struggled to find the words between sobs. "I caught him last night, with another." Isabella felt everything inside clench. It was an all too familiar feeling. "I came home earlier than usual. I had a headache and canceled my appointment with my friend," Paula continued. "And they were right there, in our bedroom." Isabella gripped Paula's shoulder tighter. A picture of 5 years ago, how she herself had discovered her husband's correspondence with his mistress in his phone, involuntarily flashed before her eyes. That day changed their relationship forever. "I was up all night," Paula said. "Walked the streets. Didn't know where to put myself. My phone was dead." "You did the right thing to come," Isabella said softly. "You don't need to be alone right now." "How did you manage?" Paula asked suddenly, raising tearful eyes to her. "When did you find out about Marcos?" Isabella took a deep breath. She rarely talked about it, but she felt it now. Paula needed to hear it. "It was very hard," she began. "I didn't sleep nights either. Lost 7 pounds in a month. I thought I'd never be able to forgive. But gradually, the pain dulled. Marcos sincerely repented, went to a psychologist, changed his behavior. We signed a prenuptial agreement. It was his idea to prove that he was serious." Paula wiped away her tears. "And now, do you trust him?" Isabella hesitated to answer. Trust is such a fragile thing. Once broken, it is never the same again. "I've learned to move on," she finally answered. "But the scars remain forever. The key is to decide for yourself if you're willing to accept that scar as part of your history." They talked for another hour. Isabella canceled a few clients, realizing that Paula wasn't up for work right now. When she calmed down a bit, Isabella sent her home, insisting that she take a couple days off. For the rest of the day, Isabella couldn't escape the memories. They came in waves. She found the messages in Marcos's phone, the sleepless nights, his tearful apologies and promises that it would never happen again. When she got home that evening, she found Marcos in the kitchen, cooking dinner. It smelled of roasted meat and spices. "Rough day?" he asked, noticing her tired look. "Yeah." Isabella took a seat at the bar. "Remember Paula? She caught her husband with her mistress." Marcos froze for a moment, stirring the sauce. "That's how it is," he pronounced after a pause. "Too bad for her." "I was remembering today. Our story," Isabella said quietly. Marcos set aside his spatula and turned to his wife. His eyes read worry. "It's been 5 years, sweetheart." He walked over and hugged her. "I thank fate every day that you gave me a second chance." Isabella pressed herself against his chest, breathing in the familiar scent of his cologne. Yes, it had been 5 years. They'd been through a lot, built a lot anew. But why today, listening to Paula's story, did she feel such acute anxiety? They dined by candlelight. Marcos was especially attentive and gentle, talking about business at the restaurant, asking about her day. After dinner, they watched a movie, sitting in their arms on the couch. It was all good, right, as it should be after 5 years of working on a relationship. But it took Isabella a long time to fall asleep that night. It had been a week since the story with Paula. At the salon, life was slowly getting back to normal, though Isabella noticed that her master still looked depressed, despite her attempts to keep a professional demeanor with her clients. Friday evening, after closing the salon, Isabella drove slowly home through the traffic-clogged streets of Sao Paulo, thinking about how to help Paula through this difficult period. At home, Marcos greeted her with unusual excitement. He was bustling around in the kitchen preparing her favorite shrimp in garlic sauce, and it was obvious he couldn't wait to tell her something. "I was talking to my mom today," he began as they sat down to dinner. "You know, I'm very concerned about the state of her house." Isabella looked at her husband carefully. Her mother-in-law's house was indeed old, a 2-story building in the suburbs of Campinas, built by Marcos's father back in the 70s. "Is something wrong?" she asked, fixing herself a salad. "The roof started leaking, and anyway, you know the neighborhood. It's not what it used to be. I think she needs to move to a newer house, somewhere safer." Isabella nodded in agreement. She'd always treated her mother-in-law well. Dolores was a kind woman who accepted her as her own daughter. "I've looked at a few options," Marcos continued, plating himself a second helping of shrimp. "There's a great house in a new neighborhood near the center. It's bright, spacious, with a small garden. Mom will love it." "Have you shown it to her yet?" "No. I want to check it out myself first, get it ready. You know Mom. She'll be worried about the expense. She'll refuse. I'd rather organize everything first." Isabella smiled. It was so like Marcos, always eager to control everything and decide for himself. "I'd like to go down next week, see the house, discuss terms with the realtor," he added. "You don't have to go. You have a lot of work to do at the salon as it is." "You're right," Isabella agreed. "Besides, I have a few important clients signed up. When are you planning on moving your mom?" "We need to take things one step at a time. Get the house settled first, then start moving things in slowly. I don't want her to be nervous." Marcos left early the next week. All day he sent Isabella messages, pictures of different houses, his comments about the neighborhoods. In the evening he called, voice enthusiastic. "Found the perfect one," he reported. 2-story house with a terrace, close to the park. The neighborhood is great, quiet. True, it needs a little renovation, but that's even better. We'll do everything to suit Mom's tastes." Isabella listened to her husband, delighted by his enthusiasm. Lately he had been so absorbed in the business of the restaurant that he rarely showed such interest in family matters. A few days later Marcos went to Campinas again, now, he said, to discuss the terms of the lease and begin planning the renovation. He returned late at night, tired but satisfied. "It all worked out," he said, taking a seat in the kitchen with a glass of wine. "Got a deal with the landlord. Now I need to get to work on the renovations. I want to surprise my mom with everything ready for her move. Maybe I should come with you after all. Help pick out furniture, curtains?" Isabella suggested. No, you shouldn't," Marco shook his head. "I know Mom's taste. Besides, you work hard enough as it is. I can handle it." In the following weeks, Marcos's trips to Campinas became more frequent. Sometimes he would leave for the whole day, returning late. He called during the day, talking about the progress of the renovation, advising on the color of the walls and furniture. Isabella noticed that he lingered at the restaurant more often, explaining that he needed to compensate for the time he spent traveling to see his mother. One night while they were eating dinner, Marcos's cell phone rang. He quickly glanced at the screen and muted it. "Who is it?" Isabella asked. "Oh, it's about the repairs," he replied absent-mindedly. "I'll call you back later." A couple minutes later, the phone vibrated again. Marcos apologized and left the table. Isabella could hear him talking in the next room, a muffled, businesslike voice. When he returned, he continued dinner as if nothing had happened, talking about the new menu at the restaurant. At the weekend, Marcos announced that he was going to Campinas again to check on the progress of the renovation. Isabella offered to keep him company. "Honey, it's such a mess out there right now," he smiled. "There's construction dust everywhere, workers. Why don't we wait until it's done? Then we'll go together and give Mommy a real party." Isabella agreed, though a strange feeling stirred somewhere deep inside. Why was her husband so insistent on discouraging her from going? But she pushed those thoughts away. After all, Marcos always liked surprises, especially for his mother. That evening, she called her mother-in-law. Dolores was as friendly as ever, asking about the salon, about her health. When Isabella asked about the new house, her mother-in-law hesitated a bit to answer. "Yes, Marcos cares for me so much," she said at last. "He says he found a wonderful home. I didn't even expect." There was something strange in her mother-in-law's voice, but Isabella couldn't quite put her finger on what it was. Maybe just the excitement of the impending move. As she lay in bed at night, Isabella replayed the events of the last few weeks in her head. Something had changed in her husband's behavior: more phone calls, more frequent delays at work, constant trips to Campinas. She tried to convince herself that it was all to do with taking care of her mother, but the unpleasant feeling of uneasiness wouldn't let go. March was unusually hot. Isabella had installed additional fans in the salon. The air conditioning couldn't cope with the hot air rushing in every time the front door opened. In this weather, the customers were getting irritable, but she tried to remain professional and friendly. Paula was slowly coming to her senses after the divorce. She could now talk about what had happened without tears, although her eyes still betrayed her inner pain. Isabella often caught herself watching her, as if seeing her story as a reflection of her own fears. At home, too, something subtly changed. Marcos was staying late at the restaurant more often. He used to call if he was late for dinner, but now he could show up at midnight without warning, explaining that it was an emergency or a problem with a supplier. One morning, picking up her husband's scattered clothes, Isabella noticed a lipstick mark on the collar of his shirt. Her heart beat faster, but she forced herself to calm down. It could have been anything, maybe the sauce from the restaurant or the wine. But an avalanche of doubt was already starting to cover her from the inside out. That same night, as they were eating dinner, Marcos's phone vibrated several times. He didn't even glance at the screen, as if he knew who the calls were from and didn't want to answer in her presence. "Aren't you going to pick up?" Isabella asked as casually as possible. "Ah, it's probably the realtor." Marcos brushed it off. "He's been calling incessantly lately about my mom's house. I'll call back tomorrow." Isabella pretended to believe it, but inside everything clenched. Why is the realtor calling so late? And why doesn't Marcos even check to see who it is? The next day, she met Juliana at their favorite cafe. Her friend immediately noticed her tense state. "What's wrong?" she asked, stirring her cappuccino. "You look like you've been up all night." Isabella hesitated. Saying her suspicions out loud meant making them more real. Marcos has been acting strangely lately, she finally decided. Constant trips to Campinas, supposedly because of a new house for Mom. Late returns. Strange phone calls. Juliana straightened in her chair, her face becoming serious. "What else?" "Found a trace of lipstick on his shirt yesterday." "Isabella," Juliana leaned closer. "After what happened 5 years ago, you have the right to check your suspicions." "I don't want to go through that again," Isabella said quietly. "Maybe I'm just winding myself up? Paula's story has stirred up old fears." "Or maybe your intuition is trying to tell you something," Juliana said firmly. "You remember how it was last time, don't you? I didn't want to believe the obvious at first either." Isabella remembered how Juliana had been the one who had convinced her to check her husband's cell phone 5 years ago. It had seemed like a terrible breach of trust at the time, but it had eventually opened her eyes to the truth. That evening of the same day, Marcos was late again. When he finally got home, he smelled of an unfamiliar perfume. He went straight to the shower, and Isabella remained sitting in the kitchen, clutching a cooled cup of tea in her hands. The next morning she woke up earlier than usual and saw Marcos already getting ready to leave. "So early?" she wondered. "Yes, I have to meet the suppliers." He kissed her cheek hastily. "Don't expect me for dinner. I'm going to Campinas again tonight." Isabella watched him hurriedly pack his briefcase. His cell phone vibrated on the table. Marcos literally jumped up to grab it and quickly muted it. After he left, Isabella stood at the window for a long time. Her mind was reeling with memories from 5 years ago. The same signs, the same restless behavior, the same excuses. Was it all repeating itself? At the salon, she couldn't concentrate on her work. Twice, she mixed up client records, which had never happened to her before. Paula noticed her condition and tried to talk to her, but Isabella dismissed it as a headache. In the evening, she met up with Juliana again. They sat in a small bar where it was noisy enough that no one could overhear their conversation. "I checked the bills from the restaurant," Isabella admitted. "Several times in the last month they've paid for dinner for two there late at night when Marcos was supposedly in Campinas." Juliana shook her head. "It's not just suspicion anymore, dear. We need to take action." "But how? I can't just ask him directly. He denies everything, I know." "Then we need to gather evidence," Juliana said firmly. "It worked last time." Isabella remembered how, once the correspondence had been discovered, Marcos could no longer deny the obvious. But now, it was different. He was more careful, not leaving obvious traces. A note from her husband was waiting for her at home. "I'll be late. Don't wait up. Kisses." Isabella crumpled the note and threw it in the trash. Then she took it out and unfolded it, for some reason wanting to keep this little piece of evidence of his lies. She lay awake at night, listening to the sounds of cars pulling up. Marcos returned around 3 in the morning. He tried to move quietly, but Isabella heard every step he took. When he lay down beside her, she pretended to be asleep. In the morning, as she was getting ready for the salon, she noticed on the floor in the hallway a receipt from a restaurant, not their family restaurant, but another in an expensive part of town. The time on the check was 11 p.m. So he hadn't been in Campinas last night. Isabella carefully tucked the check into her purse. Paula was waiting for her in the parlor with eyes red with tears. "I saw him with her," she said in a shaky voice. "They were at the mall, holding hands like nothing had happened." Isabella mechanically stroked her friend's shoulder, while one thought pounded in her head. Was Marcos holding another woman's hand in the same way somewhere right now? It was an overcast April morning. Isabella sat in her office in the salon, going over invoices and bills, but her thoughts kept returning to her last conversation with Juliana. Her friend was right. She needed to act, but how? After much thought, she decided to call her mother-in-law. As she dialed the familiar number, Isabella felt her hands trembling. The dial tone went on for an interminably long time, and finally Dolores's voice came through. "Hello? Hello, Mother." Isabella tried to speak as casually as possible. "How are you feeling?" "Isabella, honey." "Fine, except that my back has been bothering me a bit lately." "Marcos said the new house will have comfortable furniture," Isabella began cautiously. "When do you plan to move in?" There was a pause in the receiver. Isabella heard her mother-in-law sigh heavily. "Yes, Marcos cares so much. He says the house is wonderful." A strange note appeared in Dolores's voice. "Have you seen it yet?" "No, not yet. Marcos wants to surprise me when everything is ready." Isabella closed her eyes. Something in her mother-in-law's voice was wrong, some falseness, like memorized phrases. "Mother, and the old house, have you put it up for sale yet?" "No, indeed," Dolores answered hastily. "It's the house of Antonio, your father-in-law. So many memories. But Marcos said the neighborhood has become unsafe." "Oh, honey," Dolores stammered. "You know, I have another line ringing right now. Why don't we talk later?" Isabella hung up and stared at the phone for a long moment. Her suspicions were growing. Her mother-in-law was clearly not telling her something. Her answers were evasive and unnatural. There was a knock on the office door. It was Paula with a question about a cosmetics order. Isabella forced herself to concentrate on her work, but her thoughts kept returning to the strange conversation with her mother-in-law. That evening, as she was preparing dinner, she heard Marcos talking on the phone in the living room. His voice sounded muffled, but some phrases reached the kitchen. "Yes, everything is going according to plan. No, she has no idea about anything. Of course I've thought of everything." Isabella froze with the knife in her hand. Her heart was pounding frantically. Who was he saying this to? To whom? To her? Or about his mother? Marcos walked into the kitchen as if nothing had happened. That smells good. What's for dinner?" "Baked fish," Isabella replied, trying to make her voice sound normal. "Who were you talking to?" "With the supplier. Seafood delivery problems again." He reached over and kissed her cheek. "Never mind, I'll handle it." At dinner, Marcos was unusually talkative, talking about business at the restaurant, asking about the salon. Isabella kept up the conversation, but inside everything clenched at every phrase he said. Was it true or another lie? "I'm going to Campinas again tomorrow," he said casually. "I need to check on the repairs." "Maybe I should come with you after all?" Isabella asked, watching his reaction carefully. Marcos froze for a second, but quickly pulled himself together. "Honey, it's such a mess. Besides, tomorrow is Tuesday. You have a full day at the salon." "I could reschedule the appointments." No, you shouldn't," he shook his head. "Why don't we wait until it's ready? Let's give Mom a real surprise." After dinner, Marcos retired to his office to work on paperwork, and Isabella dialed Juliana's number. "I spoke to his mother today," she said quietly as she stepped out onto the balcony. "Something is not right here, Juliana. It's like she's repeating a memorized text. Do you think she knows more than she's saying?" "I'm sure she does. But why is she covering for him?" "Because he's her son," Juliana replied sharply. "Do you remember last time she knew about his connection to that woman in accounting too?" Isabella remembered. Then, 5 years ago, it had come out that Dolores had been aware of her son's affair, but had kept quiet, hoping things would work themselves out. "What do I do, Juliana?" "Check. Gather evidence. You have a prenup. He won't get away with just apologizing this time." At night, Isabella couldn't sleep for a long time. Marcos slept beside her, his breathing even and calm. How could he sleep so serenely if he was deceiving her? Or was she really winding herself up and all her suspicions were just the consequences of past trauma? In the morning, as she was getting ready for work, she noticed that Marcos had put on a new shirt, a dark blue one she'd never seen before. "Nice shirt," she said. "When did you buy it?" "Oh, this?" He ruffled the collar carelessly. "A long time ago, just rarely worn." Another lie. Isabella knew exactly the contents of his wardrobe. That shirt had never been there before. In the salon, she was surprised to see Dolores. Her mother-in-law looked embarrassed and clearly felt out of place. "I was just passing by," she began, nervously rubbing the strap of her bag. "Thought I'd stop by." Isabella led her into her office and closed the door. Dolores sat on the edge of her chair, avoiding looking her sister-in-law in the eye. "Mother," Isabella began softly, "what's going on?" "Nothing, sweetheart," her mother-in-law replied hastily. "Everything's fine." "Really? And how are the renovations on the new house coming along?" Dolores turned pale. "Marcos says everything is going according to plan." "Are you really moving?" Tears appeared in her mother-in-law's eyes. "Isabella, please, I can't. He's my son. And I am your daughter-in-law. Have been for 10 years now. Don't I deserve the truth?" Dolores cried. "I'm sorry. I shouldn't have. But he asked me to keep quiet." At that moment, Paula knocked on the door. The first client of the day had come in. Dolores hastily wiped her tears and stood up. "I have to go. I'm sorry, Isabella." She walked out quickly, leaving behind a heavy trail of innuendo and guilt. Isabella stared after her, feeling a cold resolve growing inside her. She knew now that her husband was deceiving her, and his mother was in on it. A week had passed since Dolores's visit. Isabella mechanically performed the usual activities, opened the salon, worked with clients, kept the documentation, but inside her as if a tight string was stretched. After her mother-in-law's confession, she had no doubts about her suspicions. It remained only to find direct evidence. That morning, Marcos left earlier than usual, leaving a note on the kitchen table. "Urgent meeting with suppliers. I'll be back late. Kisses." Isabella crumpled the sheet and tossed it in the trash. Notes like this used to make her smile, but now every word seemed fake. The salon was unusually quiet. The first client had canceled her appointment, and Isabella took advantage of the free time to sort through the backlog of papers. She was sitting at her desk in her office when her cell phone rang. Marcos's number popped up on the screen. She was about to answer it, but something stopped her. Isabella let the phone ring, watching the screen blink. After a minute, the ringing stopped, but almost immediately it rang again. This time she picked up the phone. "Honey?" she said in an even voice. There was a pause on the other end of the line, and then a woman's voice rang out. "Oh, I'm sorry. I thought this was Marcos's phone." Isabella felt her heart skip a beat. "You thought right. It's his wife's." Sorry. I'm here about the deliveries." The voice on the other end was clearly confused. "What's your name?" Isabella asked, calmly, feeling everything cold inside. Short beeps were her answer. Isabella slowly placed the phone on the table. Her hands were trembling. The woman's voice was young, melodic, slightly husky, and that voice definitely knew her husband well enough to call him at a time like this. There was a knock at the door. The next customer had come in. Isabella took a deep breath, trying to pull herself together. She needed to work, to smile, to keep the conversation going. But all she could think about was that woman's voice and the hastily cut-off conversation. By lunchtime, she couldn't take it anymore and called Juliana. She called. More specifically, I don't know where exactly she called, but she got on my phone. "Who called?" Her friend didn't understand. "She did. The mistress," Isabella said the word and felt it burn her tongue. Are you sure? You should have heard how her voice changed when I introduced myself. Juliana's heavy sigh came through the receiver. What are you going to do? I'm going to wait for him to come back. I'll see what he has to say. The day dragged on interminably. Isabella worked on automatic, her hands performing the familiar actions, haircut, styling, makeup, but her thoughts were far away. She pictured this woman, young, beautiful, with a husky voice. Where had Marcos met her? At a restaurant? Through mutual acquaintances? In the evening, she sat at home in complete silence waiting for her husband to return. On the table was untouched dinner. Today she could not swallow a bite. At 10 o'clock there was the sound of the door opening. Marcos entered, whistling a tune. Seeing his wife in the kitchen, he smiled. Are you still awake? I'm sorry it's so late. The meeting ran late. You got a call today, Isabella said quietly. Yeah? Who? He tossed his jacket carelessly onto the back of his chair. Some woman. Very surprised to hear from me. Marcos froze for a second but quickly pulled himself together. Ah, that was probably Rosa, the new supply manager. She's new on the job, doesn't know all the numbers yet. That's odd. A supply manager calling at 8 in the morning. We had a problem with the morning delivery. He opened the refrigerator, pulled out a bottle of water. You know how it is in the restaurant business. Isabella watched her husband. How easily he lied without even changing his face. How many times in the past weeks, months had she heard similar explanations and believed them? Why did she hang up on me when I introduced myself? Maybe the connection broke. He shrugged. Honey, you're overthinking this. It was just a normal work call. Marcos walked over to her and tried to hug her, but Isabella pulled away. I'm tired. I'm going to bed. In the bedroom, she lay awake for a long time, listening to her husband showering, walking around the house, finally lying down next to her. His breathing quickly became even. He fell asleep as if nothing had happened, and she counted the minutes until dawn, replaying the morning conversation in her head. The phone call was the last straw. All doubts disappeared. Marcos was cheating on her again. History repeats itself, only now he is more careful, has learned to cover his tracks better. He uses his mother as a cover, makes up plausible stories, keeps the phone to himself. She called her husband's restaurant first thing in the morning, asked for the supply manager. Rosa? No, we don't have an employee by that name, a surprised voice answered. Isabella hung up the phone. She felt strangely calm. Now she had a direct clue. Marcos had lied about Rosa, so he had lied about everything else. At work, she asked Paula to take on a few clients. Her head was splitting from the strain. Shutting herself in her office, she pulled out her cell phone and dialed Juliana's number. Girlfriend, you were right. We need to act. After that unfortunate call, Isabella's life was divided into a before and after. Every morning she woke up with a heaviness in her chest, mechanically performed the usual actions, making coffee, getting ready for work, makeup in front of the mirror. But all this seemed somehow unreal, as if she were playing a part in a play called Happy Family Life. At the salon, she began to make mistakes. Once she mixed up the hair dye of a regular client and she had to sit for an extra hour correcting the shade. Another time she forgot to make an important entry in the logbook and 2 clients came in at the same time. Paula watched her worriedly, but Isabella dismissed all questions. At night she hardly slept at all. She lay staring at the ceiling and listened to the breathing of Marcos sleeping next to her. How could he sleep so peacefully? Did he have no conscience at all? Or is he so used to lying that he doesn't know the difference between truth and lies? On Thursday, she missed an important meeting with a cosmetic supplier. She'd simply forgotten about it, sitting in her office, staring blankly out the window. The phone was ringing off the hook, but she couldn't bring herself to answer it. In the evening, Juliana called. You haven't picked up the phone for the second day. What's going on?" "I can't take it anymore, Juliana," Isabella said quietly. "It's like 5 years ago, only worse. At least I didn't know then, but now I wake up every day with that knowledge. Come to my place." "I can't. Marcos has to be back for dinner." "To hell with dinner. You need to talk it out." An hour later, Isabella sat in her friend's cozy kitchen, clutching a cup of herbal tea in her hands. Juliana listened in silence as she recounted the last few days, the sleepless nights, the way she checked her husband's phone when he was in the shower, the way she counted the money in their joint account, trying to find strange spending habits. "I started watching his clothes," Isabella said. "Checking pockets, shirt collars, the smell of cologne. God, what have I become?" "It's not your fault," Juliana said firmly. "He's the one who turned you paranoid with his lies." "You know what the worst part is? I can't tell anyone. Everyone at the salon asks what's going on with me, and I smile and say, 'I'm fine.' Paula tries to be supportive, but I can see it. She still hasn't recovered from her drama." Isabella got home late. Marcos was already asleep. There was a plate of dinner on the kitchen table, covered with a towel. He was waiting for her. This care, so familiar and homely, made her nauseous. The next day, a new client came to the salon, a young woman of about 28, with long dark hair and a beautiful husky voice. Isabella froze when she heard that voice, so similar to the one from the phone conversation. She stared intently into the client's face, trying to find signs of familiarity with Marcos, but the woman acted completely natural. "Are you not feeling well?" the client asked, noticing her strange look. No, I'm fine," Isabella smiled strainedly. "It just seemed like we've met somewhere." That evening she couldn't stand it and drove to her husband's restaurant. She parked across the street and sat in the car, watching the entrance. Marcos came out around 9, got into his car and drove away. Isabella followed him to the freeway leading to Campinas, but then lost him in the traffic. At home, she pulled out their wedding photos. Here they are, young, happy, confident in their future. Marcos looks at her with such love, holds her hand so tightly. Was he capable of betrayal even then? Or did it come later? Saturday morning she woke up with a headache. Marcos had already left. He'd left a note saying he was going to Campinas to check on the progress of the repairs. Isabella crumpled the note and threw it against the wall. Then she picked it up, unfolded it, and tucked it in her desk drawer with the rest of the evidence of his lies. It was unusually quiet in the salon. It was not a busy Saturday. Paula tried to make conversation. "Isabella, I can see something's wrong. Maybe I can help?" "It's fine," she smiled habitually. "Just tired a little. You know, when I found out about Rogerio, you were the only one who really understood me. Let me help you now." Isabella felt the protective wall inside her begin to crumble. Tears came to her eyes. "He's doing it again, Paula, just like he did 5 years ago. Only now it's more elaborate, more devious, using his mother as a cover, making up stories about repairs." Paula hugged her silently, and Isabella finally let herself cry. All the emotions she'd been holding back for the past weeks came out. She didn't go home that evening. She called Marcos and told him she was delayed at the salon. She had to make an urgent order of cosmetics. He believed her. Of course he did, because he makes up excuses like that all the time. She did go to the salon, locked herself in her office, and pulled out a folder of documents. There was their prenuptial agreement, drawn up 5 years ago, after the first affair. Marcos had insisted on it then. He wanted to prove his intentions were serious. According to the contract, in case of divorce because of his infidelity, half of the restaurant would go to Isabella. The phone vibrated with a message from Marcos. "Don't stay out too late, sweetheart. I made your favorite ravioli." Isabella turned off the phone. She sat in the darkness of her office, listening to the sound of the evening city outside the window. Scraps of memories swirled in her head: their first meeting, the wedding, the opening of the salon, the first betrayal, the reconciliation. How could she have been so blind? How could she believe that a man could change? She returned home at midnight. Marcos was waiting for her in the living room. "I was worried. Why is the phone off?" "I ran out of battery," she lied. "I'm sorry, I'm really tired. I'm going to go to bed." He reached up to kiss her, but she turned away, pretending not to notice the gesture. In the bedroom, Isabella stood under the shower for a long time, as if trying to wash away all the lies, all the suspicions, all the pain. But they were too deeply embedded for any water to wash away. She woke up in the morning with a firm decision. She had to act. No more hiding from the truth. No more pretending everything was all right. It was time to find out who she was, the woman with the husky voice, the one for whom Marcos had betrayed their marriage again. Sunday morning, Isabella did her usual house cleaning. Marcos had gone to the restaurant. He'd been working a lot of weekends lately, explaining that he was having problems with his staff. While dusting his office, she accidentally touched the stack of papers on his desk. Among the invoices and bills of lading was the familiar logo of an expensive restaurant in the center of town. Isabella scrutinized the receipt. Dinner for two, a bottle of collectible wine, desserts. The total bill exceeded 1,000 reals. The date on the check was last Thursday, the same day Marcos had supposedly been in Campinas. She carefully photographed the check on her phone and put it in the exact same spot. In the closet, going through her husband's clothes for laundry, she found a new shirt, a dark maroon, silk one. Isabella remembered well the contents of her husband's closet. This shirt had never been there before. There was a faint trace of lipstick on the collar, not the shade she used. When Marcos came home that evening, he smelled of an unfamiliar perfume. He went straight to the shower, and Isabella discreetly checked the pockets of his jacket. In one of them she found a crumpled receipt from a flower shop, a bouquet of white roses, bought 3 days ago. Marcos hadn't given her flowers in months. "How was your day?" he asked, stepping out of the shower. "Fine," she replied, setting the table. "And you?" "Lots of work. The new cook is inexperienced. I have to supervise everything." Another lie. Isabella knew all the staff at the restaurant. No new cooks had appeared there. The next day she arrived at the salon earlier than usual. Looking through the paperwork, she noticed an oddity. This month's electricity bill was much higher than usual. Checking the consumption by day, she saw that the main overcharge was on the days Marcos was supposedly in Campinas. "He doesn't even turn off the lights in his office when he leaves," she muttered, making a note in her notebook. Around noon, Juliana walked into the parlor. Seeing her friend, Isabella was relieved. She needed someone to share her findings with. "Look," she showed her friend the pictures of the checks and other evidence she had collected over the past few days. Juliana scrutinized each document. "He's not even trying to hide much. He's sure of his impunity." "You know what's the strangest thing? Those late returns, the new clothes, the restaurant bills. Everything is exactly like it was 5 years ago. He hasn't even come up with a new scheme." At that moment, Isabella's phone vibrated. A message from Marcos came in. "Important meeting with the vendors today. Don't expect it for dinner." "Vendor meeting," Isabella grinned bitterly. "I wonder what restaurant this time." Juliana squeezed her hand. "We should follow him." "I've tried, but he always notices the tracking, always one step ahead." When Isabella returned home that evening, she found a message from her mother-in-law on her answering machine. Dolores spoke in a strange, strained voice. "Honey, I wanted to ask, did Marcos say you were coming next week? It's just that I'm not quite ready." Isabella deleted the message without listening to the end. Further proof Marcos hadn't even warned her mother of his plans, just using her as a cover. In the night, she woke up to the sound of an incoming message. Marcos's phone was glowing on the bedside table. Her husband was sound asleep. Isabella gingerly picked up the phone. The screen was locked, but the text of the message was displayed in the notification. "Thank you for a wonderful evening. Kisses, Kay." She quietly put the phone back down. K was the first clue, the first letter of the other one's name. Now the ghost had at least one concrete detail. In the morning, Marcos had been unusually solicitous, making breakfast, asking about the day's plans. Isabella answered one-word answers, avoiding looking him in the eye. How could he be so calm, so natural after last night with another woman? A new surprise awaited her in the salon. A bill from the laundry where Marcos had taken his suits. Among the usual items was a woman's dress from a famous designer. Isabella remembered all her belongings. She'd never had a dress like that. "He doesn't even check the accounts," she told Paula, who happened to see the document. "So, sure I won't check anything." Paula hugged her silently. "You know, when I found out about Rogerio, the worst thing was not the betrayal itself, but this carelessness. He didn't even try to hide, as if I didn't even deserve the effort." After lunch, Isabella went to the bank to check on the movement of funds in their joint account. The statement showed regular cash withdrawals, large amounts, always on Thursdays. Now she knew what day of the week he met his mistress. In the evening, going through the mail, she found an advertising brochure from a jewelry store. She usually threw them away without reading them, but now she scrutinized every page. On one of them was the price of the necklace, the exact same amount she'd withdrawn from her account 2 weeks ago. Marcos returned late, smelling of expensive wine and that unfamiliar perfume. He tried to hug Isabella, but she pulled away, citing a headache. "You need to rest," he said thoughtfully. "Why don't you take the day off?" "I can't. I have a lot of work to do." "You work too much. I'm worried about you." Isabella barely held back a bitter laugh. He's worried about her. How ironic. I wonder if he worried when he bought a necklace for another woman, when he dined with her in expensive restaurants, when he lied to his mother, making her complicit in the deception. At night, she couldn't sleep again. She lay staring at the ceiling and mentally made a list of all the evidence. Receipts from restaurants, new clothes, lipstick marks, strange calls, texts, regular withdrawals on Thursdays, a dress from the laundromat, a necklace from the jewelry store. How much more proof does she need? And most importantly, what will she do with this knowledge? Juliana arrived early Sunday morning while Marcos was at the restaurant. She brought with her a large folder of documents and a laptop. Isabella brewed a strong coffee and took out some cookies. They were going to have a long conversation. "So," Juliana laid out the documents on the kitchen table, "let's systematize everything we have." Isabella pulled out her evidence folder, pictures of checks, account statements, phone records, a list of oddities in her husband's behavior. "Look," Juliana began to arrange the papers by date. "There's a clear pattern here. Every Thursday he supposedly goes to Campinas, but the restaurant bills show he stays in town." "And always dinner for two," Isabella added, looking at the receipts. "Now for the money. Regular cash withdrawals, large purchases at the jewelry store, bills from expensive restaurants. He's spending a fortune on this woman." Isabella picked up the last check from the restaurant. "You know what's weird? This restaurant. It's right next to ours. Marcos never took me there. He said he didn't want to mix personal life and business." "So he does take her." Juliana shook her head. "He doesn't even try to be discreet. I'm sure you'll never know." Isabella opened her laptop and showed her friend a map of the city. "Here's the restaurant, here's our house, and here's the road to Campinas. If he's really going to his mother's house, why are the gas bills so small? He's obviously not driving the distance he says he is." Juliana scrutinized the map. What if the house he supposedly rented for his mother does exist? Only it's not Dolores who lives there. You think— Isabella fell silent, realizing the meaning of her friend's words. I think we should check all the real estate agents in that neighborhood. If he really did rent the house, there should still be paperwork. They spent the next 2 hours calling real estate agencies in Campinas. Isabella introduced herself as a potential buyer, inquiring about houses in a certain neighborhood. At the third agency, they got lucky. The friendly girl manager told them about a recently rented house that matched Marcos's descriptions perfectly. It was beautiful, the girl chirped, but it was rented out a month ago. A man for for a relative. Would you mind sending me the pictures? Isabella asked. Maybe there are similar options. A moment later, photos of a 2-story house with a small garden, exactly as Marcos had described it, arrived in the mail. This is it, Isabella said quietly, looking at the pictures. This is where he's hiding her. Juliana wrote down the address. Now we need to plan this carefully. When is he going to Campinas next time? Thursday. He says he needs to check on the progress of the renovations. Great. Then we're going to follow him on Thursday. Isabella clutched her cup of cold coffee nervously. What if we're wrong? If he's really preparing the house for Mom? Then we'll just make sure of it, Juliana said firmly. But you don't believe that yourself, do you? No, I didn't. Too many coincidences, too many lies. Isabella pulled out their marriage contract. It clearly states that in the event of proven adultery, half of the restaurant goes to me. So we need indisputable proof. Juliana began to make a list. Pictures of the house, testimony from my mother-in-law, bills, receipts are all good, but we need to catch him red-handed. I'm afraid, Isabella admitted. Afraid to see him with her. I'm afraid I can't stand it. Juliana put her arm around her friend. I'll be there for you. We'll get through this together. They drew up a detailed plan of action. On Thursday, Isabella would go to work as usual so as not to arouse suspicion. Juliana would take the day off and follow Marcos from the restaurant. When he goes to Campinas, they will meet at the agreed place and follow. We need to think of all the details, Juliana said, making notes. We'll take my car, he knows yours. I'll put in a full tank of gas so we don't have to stop on the way. Isabella nodded, mechanically writing down her friend's instructions. Two feelings fought inside her, the desire to finally know the truth and the fear of that truth. What if he notices the surveillance? He won't. We'll keep our distance. At the very least, we have an address. We'll drive ourselves. Before evening, they had worked out every detail of the plan. Juliana insisted that Isabella take sedatives with her. You must be prepared for any eventuality. When her friend left, Isabella sat in the kitchen for a long time, going over the evidence she had collected. Every check, every account statement, every photograph, it all added up to a clear picture of betrayal. How could she have been so blind? How could she believe his explanations? Marcos returned in the evening. He smelled of restaurant kitchen and tiredness. How was your day? He asked, kissing her cheek. Quiet, she replied. Sorting out paperwork. You've been working too much lately, he shook his head. Why don't you take a vacation? Go somewhere together? Isabella almost laughed at the bitter irony of his suggestion. Go away together? When he has a house for a mistress in Campinas? No, I can't right now, she shook her head. Lots of work at the salon. Suit yourself, he shrugged. By the way, I'm going to my mom's again on Thursday. There seems to be some trouble with the repairs. Yeah? She carefully feigned indifference. What's wrong? Oh, just little things. Never mind. I'll take care of it. Isabella watched him eat dinner, talking about business at the restaurant, and thought about the fact that in a few days this familiar picture would change forever. She would learn the truth, however bitter it might be. Thursday began as usual. Marcos was getting ready for work, putting his papers in his briefcase and checking his phone. He was wearing the same dark maroon shirt Isabella had discovered a week ago. "You have a big day today?" she asked, pointing to the shirt. "No, just felt like wearing something new," he replied, adjusting the collar. "I'm going to my mom's tonight. I'll be back late." Isabella nodded, trying to keep a calm expression on her face. She already had the necessities in her bag: her papers, a fully charged cell phone, the sedative pills Juliana had insisted she take. At 9 in the morning, she opened the salon. Clients came in one after another, and she was grateful for the hustle and bustle. It was easier not to think about the evening ahead. At 12 came a text from Juliana. "I'm in position. Everything is according to plan." Around 3 o'clock, Marcos called. "Honey, I'm leaving for Campinas. Don't expect me for dinner." "Okay," she replied. "Say hi to your mom." A minute later came a message from Juliana. "He came out of the restaurant, got in the car, waiting for you at the agreed-upon place." Isabella glanced at her watch. 2 hours until the salon closed, but she had 3 more clients signed up. "Paula," she called out, "can you take my clients? I need to leave." Paula nodded understandingly. She knew her friend's plan. "Sure. Hang in there, Isabella." Juliana's gray sedan was waiting in the mall parking lot. Isabella quickly got into the car and they hit the road. Juliana drove confidently, keeping a safe distance from Marcos's car. "Surely he didn't notice the stakeout?" Isabella asked, nervously rubbing the strap of her bag. "No, I was careful. He didn't even look around. He seemed relaxed and confident of his impunity." They pulled onto the highway leading to Campinas. Marcos's car flashed ahead, the silver BMW he'd bought after their reconciliation 5 years ago. Back then, it had been his attempt to start a new life, a symbol of a renewed relationship. Now the same car was taking him to another woman. "He's swerving!" Juliana exclaimed. Indeed, Marcos's BMW had turned off the main highway onto a side road. "That's not the road to his mother's house," Isabella remarked. "I remember exactly. You should have gone straight for another 20 minutes. Juliana nodded. "Looks like we were right. He's on his way to that house he rented." They drove through a residential neighborhood with new cottages. Marcos slowed down, apparently looking for the right turn. Finally, his car stopped outside a 2-story house with a well-kept garden. "This is it," Isabella whispered, checking the picture on her phone. "The same house from the real estate agency." Juliana parked in a nearby alley that gave them a good view of the entrance to the house. They saw Marcos get out of the car, pull bags from the trunk from an expensive supermarket, and head for the door. "Look!" Isabella pointed to the second-floor window where a woman's silhouette flashed. The door opened before Marcos could even get his keys out. A young woman in a light-colored dress appeared on the threshold. She hugged Marcos, helped him with the bags, and together they disappeared into the house. Isabella sat with her fists clenched so tightly that her nails dug into her palms. Juliana silently handed her a bottle of water and a sedative pill. "What now?" Isabella asked, swallowing the pill. "Now we go to your mother-in-law. We need to hear the truth from her." They turned around and drove to the familiar neighborhood where Dolores lived. The old house hadn't changed a bit, the same cracked steps, the same potted flowers on the porch. "Wait here," Isabella said to her friend. "I'll talk to her myself." She got out of the car on shaky legs. One thought pounded in her head. This is it, the truth. This is what was behind all those lies about renovations and moving. As she walked up to the porch, Isabella remembered all the times she'd come here with Marco's Sunday dinners, family gatherings, warm evenings talking on the porch. Now, it all seemed distant and unreal. Her hand froze over the bell. Somewhere in the house the radio was playing. That meant her mother-in-law was home. Now she would call, and the conversation that would change their lives forever would begin. Isabella took a deep breath and pressed the call button. In the car, Juliana drummed her fingers nervously on the steering wheel as she watched the house. She saw the door open as Isabella stepped inside. Now all that was left to do was wait. Meanwhile, across town, in a two-story house with a manicured garden, Marcos was opening a bottle of expensive wine, unaware that his carefully constructed lie was about to collapse like a house of cards. Dolores opened the door and froze on the threshold. Her face paled, her hands nervously clutching her apron. She clearly hadn't expected to see her sister-in-law at this hour. "Isabella, what are you doing here?" "May I come in, Mother?" Isabella asked calmly, though she was trembling inside. Dolores stepped back silently, letting her daughter-in-law into the house. Everything was the same in the living room. Old photographs on the walls, crocheted doilies on the tables, the smell of fresh baked goods from the kitchen. Only the radio broke the silence, broadcasting some old Brazilian song. "I was just baking a pie," my mother-in-law fussed. "Do you want coffee?" "No." Isabella sat back in her chair, looking directly at Dolores. "I want to talk about the house." Her mother-in-law froze halfway to the kitchen. "What house, sweetheart?" "The one Marcos supposedly rented for you. The one that's being remodeled. The one you're supposed to be moving into soon." Dolores slowly lowered herself onto the couch. Her hands began to rub the apron again, an old habit that manifested itself in moments of excitement. "Marcos cares so much." She began the familiar phrase, but Isabella interrupted her. "Enough, Mother. I know the truth. I was just there and I saw your caring son bringing groceries to his mistress." A heavy silence hung in the room. The radio continued to play, but now its sound seemed out of place, almost mocking. I didn't mean to," Dolores's voice shook. "He asked me to help, said it was temporary, that he just needed to settle some things." "And you agreed to lie to me? Again?" Isabella pitched forward. "Like 5 years ago, eh?" Dolores cried. "He's my son, my only child. What was I supposed to do?" "Tell the truth." Isabella raised her voice. "I have been your daughter-in-law for 10 years. I have been like a daughter to you. Didn't I at least deserve honesty?" "I'm sorry." The mother-in-law blotted her eyes with the corner of her apron. "I knew it was wrong, but he came in so happy, saying he'd met a special woman, that she understood him like no one else." Isabella felt her insides clench with pain. "What about me? I didn't understand him. Wasn't special enough." "You're wonderful, sweetheart." Dolores tried to take her hand, but Isabella pulled away. "It's just that Marcos, he's always been like that. Back in high school, then at university. One person was always not enough for him." "And you think that's normal?" "No, of course not." The mother-in-law shook her head. "But what could I have done? Refused to help? He would have found another way to date her anyway." "Who is she?" Isabella asked. "Do you know?" Dolores nodded. "Her name is Claudia. She works for a company that supplies food for his restaurant. They met at some business meeting." "How long has this been going on?" "About 3 months, maybe 4. I don't know exactly. He'd come to see me, talking about her, asking for advice. And then he made up this story about the house." Isabella stood up and went to the window. It was sunny outside. The neighborhood kids were playing ball, an ordinary day that would change their lives forever. "I'm going to this house," she said without turning around. "Isabella, don't," Dolores began. "Why is that?" Isabella's voice became hard. Her mother-in-law sighed heavily and gave the address, the same one they already knew from the real estate agency. "Now do you realize I have to do this?" Isabella turned to her mother-in-law. "Yes," Dolores answered quietly, "but he is still my son, and I will love him no matter what. And I am your daughter-in-law, been one for 10 years. You will always be like a daughter to me, the mother-in-law cried again. No, mother, not anymore. Isabella headed for the exit. At the door she paused. You know what the worst part is? It's not the cheating itself. It's how easily you've all learned to lie, how naturally you do it. She walked out without looking back. Juliana was waiting in the car. Well? She confirmed everything. Isabella buckled her seatbelt. Her name is Claudia, works for a supply company. The affair has been going on for months. So now what? Isabella pulled the prenup out of her bag. Now we go there. I want to look into the eyes of this special woman who understands my husband so well. Juliana started the car. Are you sure? Maybe it's better to wait for the lawyers? No, no more waiting. I want to finish this today. The sun was already slipping toward dusk when they pulled up in front of the house. Marcos's silver BMW was still parked at the gate. They weren't late. The lights were on the second floor and soft music was coming from the open windows. Wait here, Isabella said, getting out of the car. No way, Juliana decisively turned off the engine. I'm coming with you. They walked up the porch steps. Isabella froze in front of the door for a moment, gathering her strength. Her hand trembled as she pressed the bell button. Footsteps were heard inside the house. The door was opened by a young woman in a light silk robe, the same woman they had seen a few hours ago. Seeing the strangers, she smiled confusedly. Yes? What can I do for you? Hello, Claudia, Isabella said calmly. I'm Marcos's wife. The smile disappeared from the woman's face. She tried to close the door, but Juliana managed to plant her foot. Marcos! Claudia shouted, retreating into the back of the house. Marcos! Isabella stepped into the spacious living room. Bright walls, expensive furniture, a bouquet of white roses on the coffee table. It was exactly as she'd imagined from the checks and bills. On the couch lay the same burgundy shirt Marcos had worn that morning. Hurried footsteps were heard on the stairs. Marcos ran downstairs, buttoning his shirt as he went. When he saw his wife, he froze like a dumbfounded man. Isabella, how did I know? She grinned. Or how I found this house? Or how long have I known of your lies? Claudia slumped against the wall, shifting a frightened look from Marcos to Isabella. She was wearing expensive jewelry. Isabella recognized the very same necklace from the jewelry store. Honey, I can explain, Marcos began, taking a step toward his wife. Don't you dare! Isabella put her hand out in front of her. Don't you dare call me sweetheart, and don't try to explain anything. I already know everything I need to know. You've been following me? An angry note appeared in Marcos's voice. Did you think I was going to blindly believe your fairy tales about renovations and your mother moving? Isabella pulled a folder of documents out of her bag. Here, admire this. All your restaurant receipts, jewelry bills, bank statements. You've gotten careless, darling. You covered your tracks better last time. Claudia twitched when she heard about last time. What do you mean last time? Didn't he tell you? Isabella turned to her husband's mistress. There was another 5 years ago. He swore then, too, that she was special, that she understood him like no one else. Familiar words, eh? Marcos turned pale. Where did you— From your mother, Isabella interrupted him. She told me everything, about how you bragged about your new love, about how you asked her to help with that moving farce, about how you made her lie to my face. Leave Mom out of this. You did. You made her complicit in your deception. Again. Claudia sank slowly into her chair. You said your marriage was broken long ago, that you only lived together out of habit. Isabella laughed, bitterly, mirthlessly. Of course I did. What else did he tell you? That I don't understand him, that we sleep in separate rooms, that I'm obsessed with work and don't pay attention to him? Marcos stepped forward. Stop it. You have no right to— I have no right? Isabella raised her voice. Did you have the right to lie to me? Had the right to use your mother as a cover? Had the right to spend our joint money to support a mistress? She pulled the prenuptial agreement out of a folder. Remember this? You insisted on this document yourself 5 years ago. Said you wanted to prove you were serious. That you would never betray me again. Marcos turned even whiter. Isabella, let's talk at home, quietly, without witnesses. It's too late, darling. Now everyone knows about your infidelity, your mother, your mistress, my friend, and soon your lawyer will know. Claudia rose from her chair. I didn't know about the contract. I didn't know you were married officially. Shut up, Marcos barked. Just shut up. No, let him talk, Isabella intervened. It's interesting to hear what else he's kept from his special woman. Juliana, who had been silently watching the scene, stepped closer to her friend. Isabella, will you stop it? Let's get out of here. But Isabella didn't seem to hear. You know what the funny thing is? I almost believed it. I almost believed that you'd changed, that those 5 years meant something, and you just got better at lying. I loved you, Marcos said quietly. Loved you? Isabella shook her head. No, you only loved yourself. Always loved only yourself. She turned to Claudia. And you, do you really think it will be any different with you? That you're special? That he won't betray you like he betrayed me? Twice. Claudia was silent, nervously rubbing the chain of her necklace, the very one Marcos had bought with their joint money. I'm filing for divorce. Isabella placed the prenup on the coffee table. You can start preparing the papers to transfer half of the restaurant. Now you'll have more time for your special woman. You won't have to make up stories about renovations and a sick mother. Marcos tore toward her. You wouldn't dare. I won't let you ruin everything I've built. You destroyed it all yourself, Isabella replied calmly. The moment you decided you could lie to me with impunity. Again. She turned to leave. Juliana followed her, keeping between her friend and Marcos. Isabella, he shouted after her. Come back. We must talk. But she was no longer listening. She walked out onto the porch, down the steps. The fresh evening air hit her face, and only now did she feel her knees shake. From behind her came Marcos's screams, Claudia's cries, but it all seemed distant and unreal. The only real thing was Juliana's voice. Get in the car, friend. Let's get out of here. Isabella got into the car and closed her eyes. There was an emptiness inside, the strange, ringing emptiness of a person who had finally stopped pretending not to see the obvious. Juliana drove the car in complete silence. Isabella sat beside her, staring blankly out the window. The last rays of the setting sun were coloring the sky blood red, reflected in the windows of oncoming cars, blinding her eyes. Water? Juliana asked, holding out a bottle. Isabella shook her head silently. Her hands were still shaking, the blood pounding in her temples. The picture before her eyes was Marcos buttoning his shirt, Claudia's frightened face, the white roses on the table, the same ones that had been a check in his jacket pockets. The phone in her bag wouldn't stop vibrating. Marcos was calling again and again. Isabella reached for the phone, turned it off, and tossed it back into her bag. Where can I take you? Juliana asked quietly. Not home, Isabella replied quickly. Not home. Let's go to my place. They turned down a side street. Isabella felt a wave rising inside, a hot, suffocating wave of emotion she'd been holding back at her husband's mistress's house. Stop it, she begged. Juliana instantly pulled to the curb. Isabella jumped out of the car, took a few steps and bent in half, choking back sobs. All the feelings she'd been holding in check, pain, anger, humiliation, burst out. Juliana put her arms around her shoulders, said something, stroked her back, but Isabella couldn't hear the words. Her ears were ringing and her eyes were blurring red. She screamed loudly, tearingly, not caring if passers-by could hear them. I hate it, she screamed. I hate him. I hate myself. How could I have been so blind, so stupid? You're not stupid, Juliana said firmly. You just loved him and wanted to believe. 5 years. Isabella pounded her fist on the hood of the car. 5 years I believed he'd changed, and he just got better at lying. She was shaking. Juliana pulled a sedative from the glove compartment. Drink it. Now. Isabella obediently swallowed the pill. She sat back in the car, wrapping her arms around herself as if trying to hold something inside. You know what the worst part is? She said when her breathing evened out a little. I suspected it, didn't I? All these weeks, months, saw the signs, found the clues, but kept pretending everything was fine. Because no one wants to believe betrayal, Juliana replied, especially the second time around. They reached Juliana's house. They went up to the apartment and Isabella went straight to the bathroom to wash her face and tidy up. The mirror reflected someone else's face, pale with red eyes and smeared mascara. Juliana brewed strong tea, took out cognac. You need to calm down, and then we'll think about what to do next. Do what? Isabella grinned bitterly. File for divorce. Claim your share of the restaurant under the prenuptial agreement. Start life all over again. Except how? How do you start over when everything inside is scorched? The doorbell rang. Juliana looked out the peephole. It's him. Don't open, Isabella said quickly. Marcos continued to ring and bang on the door. Isabella, I know you're here. Open up. We need to talk. Go away, Juliana shouted. Otherwise I'll call the police. Isabella, please. Marcos's voice sounded desperate. Let me explain. I can fix this. Fix it. Isabella walked toward the door. What can you fix? Your lies, the betrayal, using your mother as a cover, or the way you spent our joint money to support your mistress. I love you, he shouted. No, you don't. You love only yourself, always loved only yourself. Claudia means nothing. It was a mistake. Isabella laughed, loudly, hysterically. A mistake. You rented her a house for 3 months, bought her jewelry, spent every Thursday with her. You call that a mistake? There was silence outside the door. Then there was a thud, as if Marcos had slammed his fist into the wall. What do you want? He asked in a quieter voice. Money? Half the restaurant? I'll give it all, just don't do it. Don't do what? Not ruin your perfect life? Where you're a successful restaurateur, a model husband, and a caring son. I'm sorry, darling, but you ruined that life. Isabella, go away. Her voice became lifeless. Just go away. My lawyer will contact you tomorrow. They heard his footsteps on the stairs, heavy, slow. Then the front door of the entryway slammed. Isabella slid down the wall to the floor. All strength was suddenly gone. Only endless fatigue remained. I can't go on, she whispered. Can't pretend, can't fight, can't believe. I just can't. Juliana sat down beside her. And you don't have to. It's over now. Really? Isabella turned a tear-stained face to her friend. And I think it's just beginning. The divorce, the division of property, the gossip, the pity of others. We'll get through this, Juliana said firmly. You can handle it. You're strong. I don't feel strong, Isabella wrapped her arms around her knees. I feel broken, destroyed, betrayed. From the street came the sound of the engine starting. Marcos finally drove away. Isabella closed her eyes. There was an emptiness inside, a huge ringing void in the place where there used to be love, trust, faith in the future. You know, she said after a long silence, I really believed that people could change, didn't I? That love could change a person. How naive I was. Juliana silently stroked her shoulder. Outside the window, dusk was fading. The streetlights were coming on. Somewhere across town, in a 2-story house with a well-tended garden, Claudia was probably crying too, realizing that her fairy tale with the successful restaurateur had ended before it had begun.